there were people were just sort of giving me some messages, and so I'm going to take advantage to give back that information. What I noted down is that we need to have effective data on modernization, and also the impact, the analysis of impact, not only if the circulating flows are increasing, but also the topic of resilience. So we need to open a little bit our scope. I also noted down the increase in the sales of fertilizers, and the question is why? Not so much because they're being used more per hectare, but probably because hectares have increased, and also because they're being used more intensively in dry crops. That's part of the story as well. If that is not restricted or controlled, and I think this is very important, the topic of the issue of the price, it is also in water, it has no effect because the demand is inelastic in the added value production, but we've seen that the price of fertilizers has an effect as well. I think it was very cheap, and before you were saying that the price of water and fertilizer was something like 10% of production costs. And in Holland it was even less. That's what I heard. So that is something that if it is not expensive enough, we're not going to restrict it. If it were more expensive, then we would be more careful maybe. And then the issue of Mar Menor, I won't be here to hear you, but maybe you could give us an opinion on the solutions that are being applied. You talked about reducing the volume of activity, but in the system there are maybe some solutions, and you can comment on them, and I'll have a look at the case of Portugal. And it is also very interesting that finally we have an irrigation plan in Valencia at a strategic level, because at the state level it is complicated. And when you go to the level of the regional, of the autonomous community, it is easier. Thank you, Josefina. You can leave now. We will continue with the final reflection here. I will try to be brief, and I'll try to transfer an idea as a producer. As a farmer in the southeast area, intensive farming, which is very different from other growers in other areas. I have lived through some evolution from the year 1981 till now. It was a great evolution from the point of view of the fact that when we started growing tomatoes in the area of Águilas, but by flood irrigation and furrow irrigation, when the water wasn't, underground water wasn't public, it was private. When we used this furrow irrigation, copying it from United States, until nowadays, where we're talking about localized underground irrigation and high technology, I have lived through a very significant evolution. What does that mean? That we adapt, that producers and farmers adapt to the circumstances and the demand of market and society. Of course, the price is important. If in a citrus crop we're using 6,000 cubic meters per hectare, 50 cents each, that's 3,000 euros, and that would be 50% of the cost of the crop. Well, see how important it is, how important price is, and in other crops it would be similar. So we really have to measure in an intelligent way how much water and fertilizer we use, and we have to give a response to the demands of the city, of our clients. But the negative point is that we are in an environment of uncertainty, by authorities and also by a part of the society which sees us as infractors. And of course, we're nothing like that, because we have adapted, we continue to adapt, we comply with the regulations, not only legal regulations, but also the clients and the society's needs. In that sense, technification is essential, and it is a tool which will help us to continue developing. That is my point of view. Well, I will be brief. I just wanted to say that it was all very interesting to be here surrounded by experts and professionals. There are not many platforms where I would sit with them because they don't coincide. But at the end of the day, in this case, we are producing food, and we are part of the same supply chain, and maybe we shouldn't consider it a chain, but more of an ecosystem. When something affects one part of it, it affects everything. Thank you for being brief. Abel, thank you. Well, very brief too. The most important message from my point of view that we have here is that a project like Fertinova cannot just stay in self-pleased, and it has to contemplate in a methodical way the link between what they're doing and also the environment, because at the end of the day, that is their challenge. That is the important challenge, is being able to assure that we're not doing things properly, but because the environment is improving. And that is the only way in which we can see this as not as a negative action or an action taken by infractors. Also, very brief, as Josefina, she asked me about my opinion on what alternatives are in the case of Mar Menor. What I presented was the proof that the problem had already been diagnosed with many scientific studies, and that the measures taken, which had mainly to do with the control of fertigation, efficiency, etc., have failed in the objective of avoiding the environmental collapse of Mar Menor. And I am being a witness to this announced death of this lagoon. If we had to ask for compensation, that would be something outrageous, apart from the legal action taken. So we know about what hasn't been efficient. Just exclusively look at the farm level, with voluntary measures where obliged regulations were limited to a certain monitoring task or having an accounts record. That hasn't prevented the disaster from happening. So we need to have a new legal framework where we go from that limited look of the farm, we have to move towards the system. And that is where public administrations and regulators have to act, so that it's not only a matter of good or bad will of all the parties, but also a legal obligation, and also, going with the principle of whoever pollutes pays, and being solidarious as well. Guaranteeing that the river is not going to be polluted at a system level. For that, it is essential to have a control of the total irrigation surface and absolute and final total values, not only per hectare or per plot, per farm, etc. The other idea is that public administration doesn't only have to take this regulating part and apply into this principle of whoever pollutes pays for urban and for urban consumers as well. This sector this agricultural sector has to realize that this is a historical moment, because we have the chance to move from a defensive attitude when it comes to the environment, to go from this to a more proactive attitude. And because it is true, and we can prove that they take care of the environment. And in the case of Campo de Cartagena, what we are proposing is a very ambitious program of environmental reconversion of intensive irrigation, so that it stops being so unsustainable. So with this intensive farming, maybe farmers have to do something, but also public administrations have to do something to condition the whole process, not only in terms of efficiency, but as with the system in general, for the managing of demand, the control of irrigation surface, and controls with binding values when it comes to, for example, leachates, taxes, etc. Leachates rates, etc. I will be brief, and also because I just talked. But to sum up, more or less what I saw this morning in 2 words: complexity and adaptation. We saw how irrigation is a very complex system, because it is connected to production systems, to natural systems, to social aspects. And if you click somewhere sometimes, then there is this butterfly effect. So there are ways which haven't worked in the administration, saying, this is the same for everybody and we're going to have the same product for everybody, like sometimes it's happened with drip irrigation. And we cannot only focus on what we see on farms, because then we see things like what happened in Mar Menor. We have to move from there to the general term. So to overcome this complexity, we need to have a holistic vision, integrated vision, and we also need to be able to design adapted systems for the needs of each territory and every productive system. Thank you. Julio? Well, it's many things, but just one message. And I coincide with what Josefina said. The topic of nitrates and diffuse pollution goes hand in hand with the involvement of the farmer and the administration as well. Another message: the importance of getting and doing more for less, this general basin vision and not a farm level vision. And talking about Fertinova, we need to get more kilos, more money with less pollution. It seems to be difficult, but there is still a lot to do. And organic farming, that is an important problem related to nutrients. In the case of fertigation, that's very important, but let's not forget soil. Soil is alive. Sometimes, it's not only fertigation, it is soil, it is organic matter in the soil, and it helps to avoiding, for example, leachates, etc. Well, thank you. I need, I don't know if we can take a slide from Abel's presentation when he was talking about why is it necessary for all irrigators to be contributors. That is a very surprising question. Antonio, you are an irrigator. Do you pay your taxes? Do you contribute? You do, right. I can see here 3 more irrigators. They say that in Fertinova there are 371 of them. Are there any more here? Maybe you can tell us, because apparently irrigators do not contribute. And in the in our taxes system, we are not. It's not binding for us. Just out of curiosity. But well, having in a presentation the question of why is it necessary to contribute. If I asked in an event with university professors, it would be very unfair to say, why all professors have to be contributors. That would be outrageous. Even worse, if I went into ideas related to, masters which are not completely legal, etc. But I don't want to go into that. Quite evidently, Abel, who's he wasn't. I know he wasn't talking about taxpayers. He was probably talking about water-related issues. But it's true that here we have some irrigators here. I don't know, Enrique, do you pay your fees or your regulation fees? Do you comply with the economic regime of the water legislation? How many irrigators here don't pay for the fees, the taxes, their canons? Because it seems like they don't comply with all of these regulations. I think that this is not the way, because some doubts arise, and then when you have a look at reality is completely different. And I think that that shouldn't be done. We have to be more serious. Final reflection, please. Abel was saying there is no data. Does he say that because he asked the government, can you give me the list of the whole of the modernization systems of Spain, how many cubic meters have been saved? That's not being done. And the fact that that hasn't been done in 1,000 communities, that doesn't mean that there are no figures. Carles gave very clear figures on Valencia. I offered some data on a community, but we still need to make this global study. I gave the data of we went from 18,000 to 15,000 cubic hectometers, so we saved 20 to 30% as a whole. But yeah, of course, the data on 7,100 cubic meters going to 6,000, it doesn't seem like there are no figures. Sometimes sometimes we don't like them. Julia talked about a very severe case. Of course, we are against all isolated cases and irregularities, and we have never prioritized the extension of irrigation, and most of all, where there is no water, we have to fulfill with our regulations, of course, and comply with the law. And to conclude, and to include some humor, and Abel was talked about irrigators like as if we were astronauts. Something like, if there is water in Mars, then let's destroy the Earth. That humor is funny. But then allow me to put you in the same bag of 21st century inquisitors, where there's the good guy, the bad guy, but in this case, you don't give us the possibility to be forgiven for our sins. Thank you.
Todo el mundo ha podido percibir, se han hecho alusiones, no tenemos más tiempo. O sea, yo combino en que ahora hay lo que ahora se llama network.
Well, we don't have time for answers, and there will be a space for you to have the possibility to answer to what he said. Okay, you have 1 minute. 1 minute.
Esto es un programa cerrado de tiempo. No puedo.
This is a closed time program. There is a next block. I can give you a minute. I can give you an extra minute. Okay.
Gracias. Yo me alegro.
Well, I am very happy to see that my colleague has paid so much attention to my presentation. He started self-correcting himself when he talked about contributor. Of course, I wasn't referring to paying or not paying their taxes or legal or economic obligations. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about paying something for the waters extracted from an aquifer, even if it's overexploited. Zero. They don't pay anything for that. are they going to say, well, they could pay for the extraction, but this is the consumption they're making in electricity, but they're not paying for anything for the fact that future generations will have no water because an aquifer is being overexploited. And we can think about places where this overexploitation is leading to fossil water extraction. And this will be for generations to come. There is no recovery of cost there. There is no whoever pollutes pays. That is an important element because everybody extracting water from the ground or from a river, this person has to be a contributor because they are extracting this water. You know, because if I am in the city, if I open my tap, I am already paying for it just because I own it. And that is something which cannot be made obvious. Well, thank you. Luc, final reflection, please.
Yeah, I'll be very careful in...
Bueno, voy a tener mucho cuidado en mi conclusión para que no se creen más comentarios. Bueno, en primer lugar es bueno tener una visión general de lo que está pasando en la agricultura, en la escasez de agua, etcétera. Pero, por otro lado, también tenemos que vivir en la realidad europea. Es nuestro entorno. Vemos cómo los consumidores jóvenes están actuando y también tenemos que tener en consideración que la población global va a aumentar. Eso es cierto. A mí me preocupa que la población europea está envejeciendo y eso también hay que tenerlo en cuenta. En segundo lugar, buscar soluciones. A veces oigo que necesitamos normativa, que la Comisión Europea está pensando en esta normativa, pero tengan cuidado con algo. No hay una solución única para todos estos tipos de problemas. Se necesita acción local. Bruselas no sabe cómo construir esa receta mágica que solucione todos los problemas locales, así que se necesita la acción local y quizá más iniciativas por parte de estos gobiernos locales en lugar de estar esperando que la solución venga directamente de Bruselas. Hemos visto aquí ejemplos de cosas que se han hecho y no han gustado, pero bueno, no hay una solución única. Y en tercer lugar, la normativa va por un lado, pero vivimos en una constitución en la que la demanda del mercado la mayor parte de las veces es el impulsor del cambio. Si nos centramos en lo que ha pasado en los últimos 20 años, en las buenas prácticas agrícolas, con las demandas de mercado, y vemos que esto va creciendo, ese debería de ser el impulsor, porque al fin y al cabo, un agricultor tiene que trabajar de forma sostenible económicamente porque es responsable también de su familia, así que la viabilidad económica de las explotaciones deben de ser tenidas en cuenta. Y por último, aunque no por ello menos importante, cuando debemos hacer frente a estas demandas del mercado, creo firmemente que Fertinova está aportando soluciones a los agricultores para conseguirlo. Gracias.
Damos por concluido esta primera sesión.
Well, we bring this first session to a close. We're going to stop for a coffee break and maybe we can share these opinions there. Thank you.